on the clock, so I figure we'll go ahead and get started. This meeting, as our friendly robot just announced, is being recorded. We will have a recording available, and slides will also be shared. So I don't know how quickly that happens. The last time we did an informational webinar on this project, it took about a day for the video to compile, for us to send out the recording. The slides should be ready right away. If you are all registered and you fill out the registration form, we should have your email addresses to share that information. If for whatever reason you were not able to fill out the registration form, and you have reason to believe we don't have your email, both my email address and Kimberly's should be on the final slide, and I'll leave that up for a little bit for people to have our contact information in case you need it. But just to kind of get that housekeeping item out of the way, we will be sharing slides and a recording of this presentation. We expect to be with you for about an hour or maybe even a little less. Don't expect this to be a very, particularly, hopefully it's not too complicated. We try to keep this project fairly straightforward and simple for folks. These are fairly small grants, as we're about to, we'll get into the detail in a second. And the folks who we work with, namely all of you, we do not want to burden our target audience. We know that you have a lot on your plate as it is, particularly since the pandemic, and we're here to help. So there are a number of new faces, not faces, but new names in the chat. Our project's been around for a little while, but we are new to some folks. So I'll just go ahead and talk a little bit about No Kid Hungry first. No Kid Hungry in Missouri, well, actually, No Kid Hungry nationally started about 10 years ago. It was around 2009, 2010. And it was founded by, it was a nonprofit project founded by a foundation called Share Our Strength in Washington, D.C. Its celebrity spokesperson, I think still is Jeff Bridges he's probably most famous for the Big Lebowski movie, and an entrepreneur named Billy Shore. The nonprofit project model was adopted in Missouri about 5 years ago. And our project is a little different from other state campaigns. Like there's a lot of states that have a No Kid Hungry campaign. Our project is different because we are not Share Our Strength employees. We we work within their framework. We have access to all their materials. We work, fairly closely with them, but we're not Share Our Strength. We are rather a partnership. And also our project is funded by the state, through the state of Missouri, through federal dollars, which is one of the reasons why some of the grant eligibility criteria that you're about to hear about are in place. But put simply, No Kid Hungry is about ending child hunger. It is founded basically on the principles of don't reinvent the wheel, empower communities to help themselves, because communities often know not often, but almost always know their backyards better than someone coming from outside. And we should again use the tools that are available, and there are tools available both in terms of policy and in terms of physical tools that can help interested folk feed hungry kids, poor kids around Missouri. This project is a joint effort between three main entities. One is the Family Community Trust. Family Community Trust is a network of organizations that serve public functions in a nonprofit setting. Services for the various community partnerships around the state that are within the Family Community Trust do things like Meals on Wheels. Some of them serve summer food, like many of the people on this call. There are community partnerships that help with seniors, that help do tax returns, that help with recycling items in the area. They wear many different hats. They were created a little over in kind of late 20th century in Missouri as a way for there to be, more community services in our state. So the Family Community Trust is in charge of ultimately they have the funds and they sign the grant contracts. The University of Missouri Center for Health Policy is who myself and Kimberly Springer are directly employed by. And the center is a research and service center based at the University of Missouri School of Medicine that we work with a lot of data, and we also do a lot of studying about social determinants of health. And for our part, we are the project managers for this project. So we're in charge of the outreach and helping make sure people understand everything, and being accessible to all of you who have questions and are going through the process of leveraging USDA nutrition programs to feed kids. Let's talk a little bit about the problem. We can't really talk about child hunger without going over the scope of child hunger. It is an acute issue in Missouri. This number that you're about to see is not the best way to measure the need, but it is one sort of lens. I kind of think of the old proverb of the blind man and the elephant. And each blind man is kind of saying, well, the elephant must be a sail because it's one person's touching the ear, another person says it must be a trunk because he's touching the trunk, and so on. This is a lens to kind of get us a little glimpse of child hunger in Missouri, and it is based off participation data as of January 2020 that was posted on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education site. It's about half, and a lot of people are very surprised by this. I don't think, and this is me talking, that this number has gone down since COVID in terms of reality. Into the basically, that was a clumsy way to say that. What I mean to say is, I don't think there's a case to establish that things have gotten better in Missouri in terms of child hunger since the pandemic. Unfortunately, this number has gone down since the pandemic, and part of the reason why is because it's difficult to get eligibility forms filled out. For those of you who work in a school setting, a lot of what I'm talking about. For those of you who have done who've worked with USDA programs that work on an individual eligibility system, you also probably know what I'm talking about. The pandemic had many different devastating effects, and one of which was getting forms filled out and turned in. Counterintuitively, Missouri's free and reduced number among schools, there's probably many schools where the free and reduced numbers went down after the pandemic. I don't know that it's probably not accurate to assume that that's because need got less. I think if anything, need probably increased. Again, we speculate. This is the data, and it helps us kind of get a little bit of perspective on this issue. It is still very widespread. The need in Missouri. Our program leverages 3 meal areas, each of which have USDA programs that can be used to serve these meals. But we see these, or more accurately, Share Strength originally saw these as areas of potential to get at the need for children to be fed, and in a measurable way. So throughout the year, we give grants for schools that are serving school breakfast, that want to increase participation in school breakfast and have an alternate service model to that, such as serving breakfast twice a day at the cafeteria, or maybe serving in a classroom. Breakfast in the classroom has been shown to have some positive effects in terms of discipline and other areas. We also give out grants throughout the year for after-school meals and snacks. Those can be served by both nonprofits and schools. And that is also accurate to say about our summer meal initiative, which is the main thing we're going to talk about today. All of these, the bottom line is there are lots of places in Missouri where free meals can be served to children, that the server is eligible for federal reimbursements for those meals. So there's a revenue stream coming in, if you think of it from a business perspective. And and they can be leveraged. And we definitely are not in a situation where everybody who is eligible for USDA programs is using it to the fullest capability, and where it's appropriate. That is not happening. There are plenty of communities where it's just a matter of lack of awareness, and that's what our project brings to the table. That's the thing that I think we most concentrate on. It's one thing if, we're not going to say, we would never say that one approach is good for every community, but we want to make sure that communities in Missouri are aware of their options and are aware of these tools that are available to them. There are tools in your toolbox that you may or may not be using, and hopefully this project, when it works well, is making you aware of those and helping you use when it's appropriate. So those are our 3 meal areas. We're going to talk about summer, and I want to kind of talk about the grant now. So we have a finite amount of funds, and we make these grants available for a certain period. This time the grant is open and open to applications, and you can apply until March 18th. The award ceiling for each grant is $5,000. You can request less than that. You can request more than that, but or you can propose to buy something that is more than that. But the additional cost over that award ceiling, if you win, you're responsible for. Again, if you want to proceed, but we have funded requests where or grant applications where the item being purchased is maybe $5,500, and the applicant says we have another maybe it's another grant or another donor that's going to cover the extra $5,000, and we're just asking for $5,000 from this project. That is allowed, but we also take requests that are lower than that. You have to participate in one of 2 USDA programs, and let me talk about that for a second. So the USDA has several child nutrition programs. They go through this state agency to administer it, and that's the case in all states. The 2 programs that we want applicants to participate in, we want to participate in one of 2, are the Seamless Summer Option under the National School Lunch Program. And if you're in a school nutrition program, you may be familiar with that. If you're working in a school nutrition department, the USDA created Seamless Summer many years ago as a way for schools to serve reimbursable meals both during summer school and beyond. You can serve SSO in non-summer school months. The second program that we allow participation in, and again, you have to participate in one of these 2, is called the Summer Food Service Option. And that is available to both schools and other entities. We will fund nonprofits. So if you're a nonprofit organization participating in SFSP, you're going to be serving more meals. Maybe you have an idea for either an equipment purchase or maybe a marketing campaign. We don't prescribe ideas. That's kind of where you come in. As long as you're participating in SFSP, you're eligible. You've checked those boxes. So you have to be participating in one of those, or you have to plan to participate in one of those by June. So I don't want people who have never heard of these programs. Well, hopefully you've heard of them. But I don't want people who are not currently participating in this program, organizations participating in this program, to run away right now. In fact, we have funded many organizations that at the time they fill out the grant application, maybe they've only started filling out the forms for becoming an SFSP sponsor, or maybe they've only made the first phone call or 2 or looked into becoming an SFSP site and finding an SFP sponsor that they can be a site for. We've done that a lot of times, and it actually, in some cases, speaks to the goal of the project, because we want this project to have a sustainable effect, and we want it to serve places that are in high need. And by high need, we're taking guidance from the Community Service Block Grant Program, and that are low income and have never served under SFSP before, either as a site or a sponsor. But they can get up, but they're on their way and they get up and running, and by the time June rolls around, they're ready, and that happens. If you're new, that's not a disqualifier, but you do have to be participant in one of these programs. I will say that these programs they're federal programs. They're administered by the states. There's an application requirement. There's a training requirement, and all this is done with the state of Missouri. We are not we're not the regulators here. We're a helper project. But there's a training requirement, and you're communicating with your state agency. In the case of the Summer Food Service Program, that is the Department of Health and Senior Services. In the case of the Seamless Summer Option under National School Lunch, that is DESE, or the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I will go ahead and put my personal hat on. This is me, Jeremy Malarski, talking in my opinion. I find a lot of folks are really reluctant to call the state with questions. And I don't think that that reluctance is not deserved, in my opinion. The people who work for DESE and the Food Nutrition Services Division, and the people who work for DHSS and Community Food and Nutrition Assistance, they're there to help you. And I don't think, whenever I've had questions, I have not had a problem. In fact, for after school grant, which will open up again later this year, we've worked with the state to try and give some guidance, very basic guidance on the application to participate in that program. So I'm proud of our state partnership, and again, if you have questions of your state partners, they don't bite. It's okay to ask. So these are the things that make you eligible. You either have to be a school or a nonprofit organization serving in a low-income area. The programs themselves tell you whether the area is eligible. It's probably worth spending just a second on area eligibility. We don't cover it in extreme detail for summer, but we do for after school. But these programs work on an area eligibility system, not an individual eligibility system. What does that mean? It means that where you serve the child is what the rules really look at. The rules look more at the where rather than the individual child. So if you have experience with, say, some forms of CACFP, or if you have worked in a traditional school nutrition department under National School Lunch or National School Breakfast, you know that you're probably spending a lot of time chasing after your students for eligibility forms. And we talked about that earlier in the presentation. That is not an issue in SFSP or SSO. They operate under area eligibility, which means if the site where you're serving is within the attendance area of a school that is 50% free and reduced enrolled or higher, then that site is considered area eligible. That's true for both summer and after school. For summer as well, there's a second category, and that's if the census defines the area as high need, and there are tools that you can use to look that up. Then that can be eligible. So there might be areas where it's not in the area of attendance of a school is 50% or higher, but it's on the census map, and you can serve SSFP there. I bring that up. That was a lot of policy knowledge in a very short period. But I bring that up to highlight the benefit of an area eligibility program when it comes to serving children. And I want to bring it back to that. It's easy to lose sight of that. Child hunger has stigma to it, and no child wants to stick out. We've seen, and this is anecdotal, but we've seen situations where, kids who were maybe, not advertising the fact that there might not be a meal waiting for them at home, have been served by these programs. And if it's area eligible, if every kid served there is eligible by virtue of the place, you can just advertise free meals and leave things like eligibility, like concepts like eligibility out of the marketing entirely. So it really can go a long way toward eliminating stigma, approaching things this way. And I think that is that's a very big benefit of the programs. So that's what makes you eligible for the grants. We also prioritize the grants because, as I mentioned before, we have often more money than, or more applicants requests for money than we actually have funding. And to be completely blunt, I think that will probably be the case this cycle, given the amount of applicants we're getting. So we have to prioritize very, very, very often. We have two very qualified candidates in the same area, and we have to measure, we have to evaluate different aspects of their application. So this is what we prioritize. $5,000 is not a lot of money. And the idea, we would like this to be as sustainable as possible. We only have one hard and fast rule about your proposed purchase. So to back up a second, for those of you interested in this grant, you're going to encounter a hopefully fairly simple application. It's going to be on a web form. You're mostly going to be asked the organization, which organization are you applying for, and a little bit about your meal plan. Like what kind of, are you going to be serving mobile meals, or are you going to be serving a summer camp? Tell us, why, tell us a little about yourself, that kind of stuff. But the other part that we evaluate is what you're going to purchase. And we don't say that there are certain, the only item we say that you cannot purchase, that we will not even consider, is food. And you can probably see why. Just purchasing $5,000 worth of food would not have a sustainable effect for very long. So we look at how sustainable the purchase is. For that reason, historically in this project, equipment purchases have been the most commonly funded request, but that hasn't been the only thing we funded. And particularly since COVID and people having to think outside the box, the different regulatory things like waivers and having to shift gears and look for different suppliers, we have loosened some of that, that thinking. But still, we do still think in the lens of how sustainable is this? How lasting an effect is this going to have? How likely is this to really serve the purpose that this applicant is proposing? So I get asked this, Kimberly and I get questions about this priority a lot. If your proposed purchase is not kitchen equipment, it shouldn't be food, but that's not necessarily a disqualifier, as long as you have a good case for how you think it's going to serve the kids. We also, that's probably the biggest, one of the biggest priorities. The first priority, by the way, is the need in the area and how high need the area is. We look at how sustainable it is. Under that is probably, we like to see partnerships. That's generally kind of, that comes from kind of the share of strength model. I think this priority really plays into areas where you may already have a lot of summer meals being served to kids. It's good to coordinate with each other, and we like to see that. Okay, yeah. Well, that's a good question from Connie. I shouldn't be looking at the chat window, but yeah, we will answer that question. Quick answer is probably yes. I need to know a little more about what you're talking about, but probably yes. Okay, and then so we look for a partner. We like to see people partnering up, if that's, again, when that's feasible, when that works. We'd like to see proposals that serve communities that haven't been served a lot before. That doesn't mean if you applied before you shouldn't apply, and you won before you shouldn't apply again. We have funded organizations multiple times, but we are looking to be in areas that maybe haven't been served before. Okay, so yeah, somebody in the chat just asked if you can purchase food or just the purchase of equipment. Food is the only prohibition. So the easiest way to think about it is a proposal to buy actual food we can't consider that. Everything else can be considered in terms of what's prioritized, We will prioritize those purchases that are likely to reasonably have a lasting effect. And yes, that is not very specific, but you know, that's kind of a lens that we use to look at the grants. You are in terms of the application. It's an online application. It's off a platform called Qualtrics. This is the part this is what it looks like when you're asked for what you're going to purchase. You have up to 7 line items. You can, if you have more than 7 line items, if your purchase plan is more complex than this, just email us. We will take an Excel spreadsheet. But most applicants are able to have been able to use this interface, and you just put a description of the item, how much each one costs, so the unit cost, and then how many of those you plan to purchase. If it is something that is not really a unit, like maybe you're buying a service, like I don't know, it's hard to think of something like this, but suppose it were possible to buy one marketing service for a month, and that was a couple $100. Or maybe, here's one that actually seems a little more realistic. Suppose you wanted to pay one of your high school students to draw some commercial art to promote summer meals. You want to pay somebody for that. That would be allowed. It would be eligible, and you could just, there wouldn't necessarily be a number of units that you would just put one for the unit. That was complicated. What I'm really trying to say is there's going to be some purchases where there's really only one unit. That's fine, but just remember that is the unit cost, and we're gonna multiply the numbers when we evaluate. If your purchase plan isn't easily describable by this, you think it would be easier with an Excel spreadsheet, let us know. Again, we want this to be as easy as possible for our applicants. All right, we already said this, but we prioritize those that are going to have a lasting effect. Can evaluate food. We're looking for, you're going to have an opportunity to describe what you want to do. We really want to hear your idea, and we want to, and again, if your idea is very simple, that's fine too. We just, I think we can help people with their plans as well in some cases. Once we prioritize them. So, okay. Sorry, that shouldn't be on there. You do have two. I'm sorry, this is an old slide. You do have 2 reports once you're awarded the grant. This slide is out of date. We no longer require monthly meal counts because we can get that from state data. But we do have you fill out a report where you kind of tell us some of the lessons learned from the summer, and maybe what any kind of feedback for us. And then the most important reporting requirement is this second thing on this slide. So this is federal money, and we do have to keep account of it. Very serious about that responsibility. So at a certain point, I think for summer grants we do after the summer, we need copies of everything that was actually purchased, a description of everything that was actually purchased, and then you send that in to us. We have a number of important dates coming up. This grant is due at noon on March 18th. We hope to announce awards by April. We announce after school meal and school breakfast grants at the same time. That cycle is concurrent, and we expect to open that in this coming spring. Finally, that was the main grant points. I can tell you that summer tends to be a little more competitive than after school, but there have been summer cycles. There was one summer cycle during COVID where we funded just about every applicant. This is a big need in our state. I expect it to probably be very similar to last summer. And we would love to see lots of applications. While I have our contact information up, for those of you who are familiar with USDA programs, maybe you're a little bit of a veteran with this, you're probably aware that we are currently in a federal waiver environment. It means that, put simply, there are several waivers that have been applied to all of these child nutrition programs, such as whether the kids have to be in a congregate setting when they're eating. At one point, there were rules about activities that were somewhat loosened to help people serve during COVID. It is our understanding that these waivers will expire in June. I have no insight, absolutely zero, if not less than zero insight on whether they will be renewed. I can tell you that we are not advocates, but I can tell you there are folks who are in the advocacy community that would really love to see those waivers extended. I know that our state partners are waiting to see whether those waivers are extended, because that's going to have a great deal of effect on their duties and how they move forward. That is to say, I don't know how the waivers will affect things. I can tell you that before COVID, when we had the least summer grants, and then the pandemic became very acute, and there were a lot of applicants that were asking. This was for the school breakfast program. We gave out school breakfast grants, and there were many applicants that were actually serving not under the school breakfast program, but under Seamless Summer, because the waivers had made it so that it made sense to do that. And those applicants said, well, we're not serving under school breakfast. Does that mean that we can't have the grant? And the answer was no. We just want you to count your actual breakfast meals. So for the purpose of this project, for our purposes and what we prioritize for who we fund and why we fund, the meals are what's important to us, and the measurability of the meals are what's important to us. So carte blanche, the reason why, probably the basic reason why when Share Strength was first coming out with this project model, that they honed in on USDA programs, and one of the reasons is because it's the measurability and the fact that those meal counts are in public data. So whatever happens with the waivers, this is my point with all this. Whatever happens with the waivers, there will be a way to count meals served under these grants, and that's the priority for this project. So if you find that it's hard to imagine how this would come into play, but if you find that you get the award and then the regulatory or waiver environment changes such that so that you're participating in a different USDA program, that's not going to be a showstopper. Whether the waivers are extended or not will probably have an effect on how generally this community of professionals goes about their business, almost certainly. Okay, we have a question in the chat. Did I miss how many grants are funded each year? We didn't put that up. I think our average is about 20 in terms of applications, because if you work out about the amount of funding we have, it can be, it ranges around that 20 ballpark. Kimberly, do you have a different number?
Yeah, I can speak to that. In the past 4 years, when we've ran the summer program, we've funded about 140 applications. We fund roughly half of the number of applicants we receive, and Jeremy is correct, it's right around that 20 mark. So yeah, just sort of a ballpark figure there for you.
Now, for the nonprofits in the room, or the schools who are, well, this is mostly for the nonprofits, but this may apply to schools as well. Particularly if you're new to SFSP, the Summer Food Service Program, I would, again, there's some reading to do if you're very new to it. The state has a robust application. You and then they are there to help you. There are people who are, professionals who are available for questions once you've read that. Be respectful of people's time, obviously, but they're there for questions. And you have an option. I mentioned site sponsor, and I didn't really explain that before. So under this program, a sponsor is an organization that is responsible for working with the state, for filing the reports with the state, for collecting the claims from the state. A single sponsor can have one or more sites. The site can be operated by the same organization that operates the sponsor. And it can be the same organization at the sponsor entity, or it can be a different one, and that happens very frequently. And you can have, I don't know, a school district as a sponsor and maybe a Boys and Girls Club as a site, or sometimes we've seen the reverse of that. I don't know if it's happened so much in Missouri, but in other states. So the sites are where the food is served, and they work with their sponsor under the program. I bring up site sponsor for new applicants because I don't work for the state, and I want to go into extreme detail, and particularly for a presentation like this, but generally speaking, the training paperwork / onboarding, if we'll say, or getting up and running, time and costs are less for sites than they are for sponsors, because the sponsor is kind of the point contact for the state regulators and the program. The site arguably has less paperwork. So you're feeding kids and all, but you arguably have less paperwork as a site. And if you're in an area that already has a lot of sponsors, then I would just informally, it might make better sense to see if you can be a site rather than another sponsor. If you kind of think of the system from a big picture, lots of sponsors in one area, it can lead to some inefficiencies. But those choices are up to you. In terms of the grant, you have to be one or the other. You have to be a SFSP sponsor, an SFSP site. You have to, or pending, to be up and running by June, or you have to participate in the SEMA summer option under launch. Okay, that was a lot of information. I will have lots of follow-up for you, including the slides and the recording. One thing I will also send is links to our grant application. We have a what we call a funding opportunity announcement. We have funding opportunity announcement documents, about a 2-pager that lays out all the rules and the priorities that I described earlier and were on the slides. There is also, I'm just thinking out loud, there are interactive tools, one that's offered by USDA that allows you to see where existing sites and sponsors are. And also there's something called the USDA Capacity Builder. And I highly recommend, if you're kind of planning out your summer food service, highly recommend using that Capacity Builder, because it can tell you things like, most importantly, where your students are. So if you're kind of looking at an interactive map of where existing sites are, where places like libraries, places like parks, museums, places like where the community gathers can be great SFSP sites. SFSP can be used for events too. But anyway, those USDA interactive tools can help you find those, and I will send the link to those tools. It's exciting to see this many people interested. We hope to do some real good with this money, and especially hope to be good assistance for all of you. Our information is up on the slides, and again, I will be sending emails to all the registrants. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions. This is what we do, and we're happy to help. Is there anything else for the good of the group before I go ahead and close the webinar? All right, very good. Thank you all for your time today, and have a great rest of your afternoon.